Let's get started where we left off. I believe we left off, I see where we left off. So we were talking about the prologue to the Ten Commandments right there is what we're talking about. Let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6. So we will get started on the Ten Commandments today, finally. I know you're like, I feel like we need to do some intro stuff, and especially concerning the law. Since there's so much confusion about the law, even among Christians. Of course, today there's no confusion in our country about the law. No one wants to follow it. It's pretty simple, right? So anyway, it's not about what the law says, about what my feelings say. But we talk about the prologue, the historical setting. It gives the context to the Ten Commandments. Remember, the Israelites had just come out of Egypt. Egypt was a highly polytheistic culture. They worshipped many gods. Romans chapter 1 talks about that exactly, that they made, I won't try to quote it. What is Romans? Don't turn there. I got this. You stay where you're at. When it talks about Romans 1, it talks about those people who, when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful. They became fools. They changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, birds, four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Isn't that what the Egyptians did? They had a statue or a god for everything, right? Over the centuries of their captivity, Israel had started, and the Israelites had started to worship these. Had started to worship these strange gods. Also, bless you again. I'm going to pause here just in case there's another.
It's usually 3.
Oh, is it usually 3? Okay, that's all right. That's good. A woman that knows her sneeze count. That's always good. The Israelites had started to worship these strange gods, and God was fixing to give the Ten Commandments based on who He was and what He had done for them. If you'll go, don't go to Exodus, but God saved His people for His glory. And the Israelites saw God deliver them by judging the gods of Egypt, right? The many plagues that came upon Egypt, we talked about those last time, represents His sovereignty over all those other gods, small letter G gods, right? So they worshiped the Nile, and so you had God mess with the Nile, and it turned red. They worshiped frogs, and they had an infestation of frogs, that God gave them that. They worshiped cattle, so God, what did He do to the cattle? He struck down the firstborn of all things, including the cattle. Thank you. And then the sun. So all those gods that they worship, God is showing them, no. The plagues of Egypt are showing them, no. That's not the true God. I'm the true God. And also not just showing the Egyptians, but showing the Israelites who had fallen into idolatry. Right? Deuteronomy 6. Are you there? Look at verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. God loved Israel and expected Israel to love Him back. Is that so mind-blowing to anybody? Right? If you love your spouse, do you not expect your spouse to show love back to you? One person has a good relationship, nobody else? All right, good. Israel was to worship God alone because of the unique relationship that God had with Israel. The Old Testament describes it. That's the reason why I use the example. The Old Testament describes that relationship as a marriage. It describes the relationship, if you look at the Song of Solomon especially, it describes the relationship of God to the Israelites as a marriage, right? And every time that Israel went away from God, the Bible and the Old Testament describes that as adultery. Spiritual adultery, right? So in this first commandment, God is taking a stand against the gods of Egypt that the Israelites had just come out of, against any other false gods, past, present, and future. This commandment, let's go to, we won't go back to Exodus real quick. We'll go somewhere else. But this commandment was unprecedented. No other nations or cultures of the world prohibited the worship of other gods. All other cultures of the world allowed the worship of other gods. This was totally unique to Israel, that it says, the Lord our God is one Lord, thou shalt love Him with all thine heart. And implicit in the first commandment, you don't love anybody else. Turn to Galatians 4. Let's go to Galatians 4. Galatians 4. And an interesting point here that I want to point out that Israel had to fight against, and I think that we have to fight against today. And that's the idea of false gods. Now, we'll go into that maybe later, but we don't worship statues. We've said that before. You don't go to Times Square and they have a big statue set up and people worship that. No, but we got our own things, don't we? Do we not have our own things? I don't know why the worship, why so much today people are worshiping self, and the worship of self today has turned sexualized, where it's the idea of gender and identity and all that's being worshiped, and be who you want to be and all that sort of stuff. I don't understand why that is ours, and for the Romans it was actual statues, whatever, but who knows? There's reasons there's reasons behind that. It would take 4 or 5 Sunday schools to go into the history of that. I'll recommend a good book if you have time afterwards. Anyway, these false gods hold a kind of spiritual power over their worshipers. Can I say that again? These false gods hold a kind of spiritual power over their worshipers. I don't mean that they are gods. I mean that we allow those things to hold a spiritual power over us, right? When we open our heart to false gods, we're opening up our heart to spiritual powers that we don't even want to probably mess with or think about. Galatians 4, look at verse number 8. Galatians 4:8. Howbeit then, when ye knew not God, ye did service unto them which by nature are no gods. Now God's reminding the Galatians of the false gods that they had formerly served, right? You serve those that are not really God, and now that you know God, you need to serve and worship Him. But he's talking about that. The false gods have power to enslave their worshipers. I do believe in demonic forces. I believe demonic forces use false gods to gain control over those persons. The false gods of Egypt had real spiritual power that the worshipers gave them, right? Over the hearts and the minds of the Egyptians. And God got them out of Egypt because guess what? Those same false gods were starting to hold power over the Israelites also. And so God wanted to remove them from that, set them aside, set them apart in the wilderness, and give them these 10 commandments, the first being that we're fixing to study. That's why God defeated these false gods one by one in the plagues of Egypt, right? To break their spiritual influence, to show that He alone is worthy of worship. And that's why He set them aside. Now go to Exodus 20, and let's look at the first commandment. Are you ready? Finally, we're getting started. Sorry for the long introduction, but anyway, I felt it was necessary. So let's go through the 10 commandments. Do you have your handy-dandy 10 commandments placeholder? Nice, very good. Oh, nice. I got one of those at home, and I got one of these here. I got 2, so whatever. All right, then. I think I've given them all away, so I don't have any extra. If we need extra, I'll order some more. Anyway, let's do this. Are you ready? Exodus 20. And let's look at the first commandment. The first commandment is in verse number 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And your handy-dandy card says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. I like that, King James. So anyway, so I want to say some things about the first commandment. Are you ready? Here we go. Did I talk about this at all? How each commandment reflects the character of God? I thought I did, but I did it in a different order, maybe. Okay, that's okay. Let's do it. Are you ready? She's just saying that because she wants to move on, and she doesn't really remember. But anyway, we did the principles of interpretation. I did this a little backwards, right? Okay, what the 10 commandments? Okay, good. All right, here we go. The prologue. Yeah. That's what we just did about the first. All right, good. This is where we are now. So let's look at some. Let's go to right here, the second one, the historical meaning of the first commandment. Now, one of the things about the first commandment, it excludes man-made gods, right? It says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That excludes man-made gods of any kind. Because if it's not the God, it's a man-made God, right? Obviously, right? Christians should live our lives by the law of God. We should not be looking for any of the old gods that we used to worship. What gods did you worship before you got saved? I don't know about you, but I worshiped the God of pleasure. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to do what I want to do. I worship the God of freedom. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do, including my parents or nobody else. And I hate when they drag me to church. And then I remember as a kid thinking, Why we got to go on Wednesdays too? Sunday's enough. Why we got to be like all those Christians that go on Wednesday night also? And I didn't like that, right? I didn't like that at all because it blew a Wednesday night. I could have been watching the Rockford Files or something. I don't know. Anybody? You don't know what that is. You'll stop laughing. Rockford Files? No? You know? Oh, okay. They have Jim Garner. He was like a detective. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah, he would have been the right. All right. Anyway, I've said this before, and I've used this before as an example. Bob Dylan was right when he wrote that song. You got to serve somebody. You got to serve somebody. Right? Bob Dylan was right when he wrote that song. Either people will worship. Either we as Christians will worship and serve the true and living God, or we have to choose something else to worship. Now, unbelievers don't have to choose anything to worship. They worship whatever they feel like, but they reject God, right? God's people will either worship God or will end up worshiping something because we're made to worship. Isn't that interesting? I believe we're made to worship. I think it was John Calvin that said the heart is an idol factory where our heart is constantly creating idols and constantly wanting us to bow down to those idols. Because we were born to worship the one true and living God, but when sin entered in, now our loves, I guess you might say, our desires are disordered. We have desires, but they're not the right order, right? What's the right order for desires? Love God before anything else. That's the right order. But our loves are not in the right order because sin entered in, right? And so when Bob Dylan said you got to serve somebody, he was right. You must choose to serve a true and living God or a false and dead God. Those are your choices. A God of your making or the God that made the heavens and the earth and sustains the universe. You have two choices today, and they're very starkly clear. Either a God of your own making, a false dead God, or the true and living God. But like Bob Dylan said, you're going to serve one of those two. You're going to serve somebody. Now I know he was probably talking about the man and sort of like that, but it's true. The idea is true. Turn to Joshua 24. Joshua 24. That Joshua, I've never used this joke before. That Joshua, he is so much a Pharisee. Joshua judges Ruth. What? I've used that one before. I wasn't expecting it to go over like a lead balloon. Anyway, Joshua 24. And let's look at verse 14. Look what Joshua, now this is when Joshua is talking to the people. He gathers them all and he's giving them a speech, right? And we know this speech because of the famous the famous verse, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, right? But that's not the verse I wanted to look at, all right? Look at verse 14. Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this, this is the famous verse, sorry. Choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. Because I don't care where you are, there's going to be false gods. Here's the deal. I could get alone by myself in the woods, which I almost am. I'm close to it. Once in a while, I'll still have people drop by, and that's cool. Like Jared dropped by last night, and that's cool. But I like being isolated, right? But you know what? Wherever you are, go in the woods, you isolate yourself. You're like, I'm getting away from the world and the false gods of the world. Guess what? You still have yourself. There's no escape. Bad news is there's no escape from the self, right? Because I believe, like Calvin said, our hearts are an idol factory, constantly wanting to produce idols to take God's place. That's the old man living inside of us. So anyway, I'm sorry, Joshua's clear point, let's finish the verse. The gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua's clear point to the children of Israel was that to serve a living God means putting away all those false gods that they served before the flood and after the flood. And the gods that they're going into the land right now, the promised land, they have gods there too. All gods that would fight for our attention and our affections, those are idols. Anything or person that has our primary loyalty has become another god to us. Let me say that again. Any person or thing that has our primary loyalty has become an idol or a god to us. I don't care if that loyalty is a good thing. Sin and putting up idols is not just idolizing and worshiping bad things. It's idolizing and worshiping good things above the Lord. Again, our loves are disordered. Our desires are disordered. They're out of place since the fall, right? And so now we love the things that we shouldn't love, and we hate the things that we should love. Did I say that right? Good. Like Paul says, that I don't want to do, I do, and those are the things that I want to do, I don't do, right? It was a dilemma. Paul, it was like tearing him apart inside. He said, "Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death?" And so that's what I think Joshua was trying to get a point across here to the children of Israel. But anything that has our primary loyalty has become another god to us. I've got a quote by Alistair Begg. I think Brother Harris quoted Alistair Begg last week. So there we go. We're reading the same books, apparently. The application of this historic incident is clear for the Christian. The liberation of God's people from Egypt foreshadows an even greater deliverance and redemption that is ours through the work of Christ on the cross. You see, that's what the deliverance of the children of Israel foreshadowed. Our deliverance from sin because of the cross, right? The Christian's supreme loyalty is to the Lord Jesus, who loved him and gave himself for him. The supreme loyalty for the children of Israel should have been God, who delivered them out of Egypt. Our loyalty is to Christ, who is also God, who delivered us from sin and death, right? The point made so clearly in Joshua's call to the people is that to serve the living God means putting away other gods that are pretenders to the throne, right? So Christians are more likely to break this commandment, not in openly choosing bad things. I'm going to worship the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to take my primary loyalty, right? I don't know what kind of God you're worshiping. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. But anyway, we're not likely to do something stupid like that. I didn't mean that as a shot at the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, idolizing any sports team would be... What? Okay, well, I didn't mean it that way. I could have chosen the Houston Texans, but no one's going to idolize them. I mean, come on. Anyway, so... we Christians are not going to openly do stupid and idolize bad things. Duh, right? We're not that stupid, right? Although sometimes I amaze myself at my own stupidity. Anyway, but we sin against the first commandment when we take the things that God has given us for our enjoyment, the things he's given us for our pleasure, and devoting so much to those things that we make an idol out of them. There's a lot of different things. We won't go over them now. It could be work. It could be it could be a member of your family. I hate to say this, but for some people, it really is true. I've taught too many years. I've seen it happen so many times. Parents almost seems like they're idolizing their children. They're not happy if their kid's not happy. If their kid gets in trouble, they run down to the school. It has to be the teacher's fault or the principal's fault, whatever. It's like you're idolizing your kids. How does that work? No, don't do that, right? So for a Christian, it's idolizing things that God has given us that are legitimate things and good things, but putting those things in a higher place than God. Our desires are disordered, so putting those things in a higher order than God, right? We devote so much time. What do you devote your time to? What do you devote your energy to? What do you devote your money to, right? So we're more likely to break the commandment in this way. I've got another quote from Alistair Begg. He says this: "The perversity of the human heart is such that even these good things may become the occasion of idolatry." What's wrong with family? Absolutely nothing wrong with family. Is there? No. Family, you know what? Family's given by God. How could it be bad? Guess what? Some people make an idol of family. Like I just told you, those people that make an idol of their kids, right? Anyway, can we look at this a little bit more detail, all right? Let's define, whoops, sorry about that. Uh-oh, here we go. Let's go right there. All right, let's define an idol right there. An idol is anything we want more than God. That's an idol. Anything we rely on more than God, anything we look for greater fulfillment than God, that's an idol. Thomas Oden, who I have no idea who this guy is, I read it somewhere, obviously. It is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. What can God give you? He can give you pleasure. He can give you joy. He can give you happiness. He can give you purpose. He can give your life meaning. Anything that gives those things other than God, or that you look to give you those things other than God, that's an idol. And guess what? I've said it a million times, idols will always disappoint you. And they'll end up, if you stick with it long enough, enslaving you. Because you're going to be a slave to somebody, like Bob Dylan said. You're going to serve somebody. I've got a quote by Tim Keller. He says, a counterfeit God's anything so central and essential to your life, I like this quote, that should you lose it, your life would feel hardly worth living. Is there anything in your life now that if you lost it, you're like, I don't think I could go on. I don't think I'd want to go on. Is there anything so important to your life that if you lost it, your life would not be worth living? If that's true, that's an idol. I'll continue on. An idol has such a controlling position in your heart, you can spend most of your passion and energy, emotional and financial resources on it without a second thought. It can be family and children, or career and making money, or achievement, critical acclaim, saving face, social standing, romantic relationship, peer approval, competence and skill, secure and comfortable circumstances, your beauty or your brain. See, I've always had a problem with my beauty, making an idol of that. Well, my beauty and my brains. I guess it's both. I'll keep going because the list, he's listing a bunch of stuff. Your beauty or your brains, a great political or social cause, your morality and virtue, or even success in the Christian ministry. When your meaning in life is to fix someone else's life, we may call it codependency, but it's really idolatry. An idol is whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I'll feel like my life has meaning. Then I'll know I have value. Then I'll feel significant and I'll feel secure. There are many ways to describe that kind of relationship to something, but the best way to describe that, he says, is worship. Anything you worship other than God is idolatry. I'll continue the quote. If anything becomes more fundamental than God to your happiness or your meaning in life and your identity, then it is an idol. So what does that cover? What could that cover? Pretty much anything, right? It could cover pretty much anything, right? The Bible does speak about atheists and unbelievers, but it speaks much more about idolatry and idolaters. Maybe because unbelief is a sin that you cannot commit if you're a Christian, right? If you're a Christian, you cannot commit the sin of unbelief, right? You can't do it. So the Bible speaks about unbelief and much more about idolatry, I think because it can be something that can be committed by believers, right? And it always is. And it also can be committed by unbelievers. So the first commandment is the first commandment because it's the sin that drives all other sins. For example, is lying a sin in the Ten Commandments? Well, look at right here. It says, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. That's number 9. So lying is a sin, right? Everybody agree? Why do we lie? Think about that. Why do we lie? Sometimes I think about that. Why did I just say that? You ever do that? I don't know. I do that constantly every day. I'll say something and afterwards I'll leave that person. I'm like, I didn't need to say that. Why did I say? Usually it's something sarcastic or mean. I'm like, I didn't need to say that, or rude. Why did I say that to that person, you know? So why do we lie? Well, sometimes we lie because we're afraid of the disapproval of others. Sometimes we lie because we want our reputation intact, or we want to look good, or we want to manipulate someone, right? So there's different reasons why we lie. Lying is caused by turning to something other than God. What's more important to me? My reputation, so I'm willing to lie. What's more important to me than God? That I look good in front of other people, so I brag, lie, right? It's at the root of all the other sins. We lie because of some other thing that we want more than we want God, right? And so we're willing to break the Ten Commandments and lie, right? We want something in the created world more than we want the Creator. Turn to Romans 1. I read the verses, but let's go ahead and read them together. Can we read them together? Romans chapter 1. Just one of the pivotal chapters of the Bible to me is Romans 1. You want to read some deep stuff, Romans 1, 2, and 3. John 1. I mean, there's some deep Ephesians 1. Look out. Put on your floaties before you go there, people. Romans 1, verse 18. Can we go to there? Romans 1, 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. We can go down to, well, let's just keep going. I need someone to read this for me. Who wants to start in verse 19? Thank you, Jonathan. Let's go to verse 25.
Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God.
Can we stop right there? It says they knew God. What did the heathen know? God. You read it for yourself. I don't care what context you want to put it in. Because it's talking about the heathen. It's talking about the heathen. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all unrighteousness and righteousness of men who hold the truth. It's talking about the unbelieving heathen. If you don't like that word, it's a Bible word. Heathen is a Bible word, right? I use it sometimes to describe my 3 sons when they were little. No, I didn't, really. Anyway, we're cat sitting for somebody, and that little cat she's a heathen for sure. Tearing up my furniture. That's why we don't allow cats inside the house. Nathan. Anyway. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Brother Jonathan, but that's an important point. It's talking about the heathen. What did the heathen do? That can't be the bell, y'all. Go ahead, brother.
When they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen.
They replaced the worship of God with worship of earthly things, and they made idols of earthly things like, I don't know. It says four-footed beasts and creeping things, maybe grasshoppers, frogs. The Egyptians did, right? I asked about that last time I was here. One more night with the frogs. Skip knew it. Skip knew it. You know that song too? Yeah. Did you ever see him sing with his mom? Oh, some people disagreed with me last time about that. No, I'm kidding. That's his stepmom? I never knew that. Interesting. Okay, cool. One more night with those stinking frogs. One more night in sin. Yeah, that was a good one. I like that song. All right, anyway. So, yes, they replaced the worship of God with the worship of earthly things. Look at verse 26. For this cause, what cause? They worshiped idols. They worshiped earthly things. For this cause, God gave them up unto vile affections. The worst thing that can happen to you, yes, I agree. The worst thing that can happen to you is for God to give you up. If God is dealing with your heart right now, count yourself lucky. I don't want to hear about God. I don't want to keep hearing about God. I don't want to go to church and hear about God. I'm tired of all that God stuff. Be thankful God is still dealing with your heart, because the worst position for you to be in is for God to give you up. When God gives you up, what are the chances that you will be born again? Would 0 be accurate? That's my take. Let's keep going. For this God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use of that which is against nature. Likewise the men living natural as the woman, burning their lust one toward another, men with men working, which is that which is unseemly, receiving themselves the recompense of the error which was meet. What is their consequences? God's going to give them up. And when God gives you up, guess what? Anything is possible. Starting with homosexuality, but continuing for the rest of the chapter we don't have time to read, all right? I got to catch my breath. All right. That COVID did a number on my breathing. Anyway. Even good things like marriage and I've only had it twice, so, the shot, guys, the shot will work 100%. Undoubtedly. Even good things like marriage and family can become idols if we allow them to take over any of God's functions in our lives. What is God's function in the life of a Christian? To give you meaning. If you look for your meaning in anywhere else, it's an idol. What's God's function in your life? To give you purpose. If you look anywhere else for purpose, it's an idol. What's God's function in your life? To give you joy. If you look for joy anywhere else, it's your idol. We could go on, but you get the idea. Worshiping gifts in the place of the giver. That's what it said in verse 25. To uncover an idol, ask if any gift has become more important to you than God. Anything can serve as a counterfeit God, especially the good and best things in life. I got some examples. You ready? Here we go. Oh, there it is. Examples. Here we go. All right, good. There can be personal idols. We've gone over these. Family can be an idol. I would do anything for my family. If you really mean that, I worry that you're idolizing your family. Because I would not do anything for my family. Oh, Brother Chris, that's awful. No, it isn't. Obviously, I wouldn't do anything for my family. If my family said, stop going to church, I'd be like, I don't think I can do that. I'm sorry. If my mom and dad said, stop that, I'm like, well, I want to honor you. The Bible says that. But the first table of the law takes precedence over the second table. I must worship God. I'm sorry, I can't do that. So family can become an idol. Romantic love. Usually with men, it's not romantic love, it's sex. With women, it's more likely romantic love becomes an idol. If I just find that person who loves me and thinks highly of me, then I will have everything I need. Maybe for a little while, probably not for long. Money, power, achievement, health, fitness, again with me, physical beauty, right? What about cultural idols? What does our culture idolize? Well, nations can idolize stuff, military power, economic prosperity. Our nation idolizes economic prosperity. What's the American dream? House, car, vacay in Colorado, snow ski, whatever. I'm 55 or 6 or whatever. I don't have enough money to go to Colorado and snow ski. I'm sorry. Maybe that's because I made bad economic choices and became into the school system, socialized teaching. Anyway. Traditional cultures idolize family, hard work, duty, morality, right? In Western culture today, what do we idolize? I can't hardly talk. I'm almost done. We idolize individual freedom. I want to be free. Don't tell me how I can dress and not dress. Don't tell me what gender I can identify as. I have freedom. Freedom is an idol today. You don't have freedom. You are a slave to sin. You're a slave to Satan. You may think you have freedom because Satan wants you to think you have freedom. But ultimately, you're a slave to self, sin, and Satan. The 3 S's, right? Individual freedom. What do we idolize today? Fulfillment. I want to feel fulfilled. Or I might have a midlife crisis, right? That was a low down, dirty blow that my wife told me a week or so ago. She said, I think you're having a midlife crisis. I'm like, that's like cursing at me, saying I'm having a no. Just because I'm extra grouchy lately and stuff does not mean I'm having a midlife crisis. Just because I'm going off on my superiors does not mean I'm having a midlife crisis. It means I'm extra cranky. And I'm trying to hold on to both my jobs at Angelina College and Latexo by the end of the month. I've made it through this midlife thing. All right, anyway. What else is an idol in our culture today? Self-expression. Be free to express yourself. Melissa, what is your love language? I'm sorry, this is not Oprah Winfrey channel. All right. Anyway, no, it's true. Ian Murray, sorry. I can't remember his name. He teaches at Cross College in Pennsylvania. I can't remember his name. He wrote a really, really good book. I need to close. And he took from another guy, I think it was Charles Taylor, famous sociologist. He coined the term expressive individualism. That's our culture today, expressive individualism. That's what people worship an idol today, expressive individualism. I want to be an individual. That's fine. You want to be gay? I don't care. You want to wear women's clothes and you're a dude? I don't care. Just get away from me, but I don't care. No, I just said it. I don't care. But that's not good enough. It's not just individualism. What did the phrase he coined, Charles Taylor? Famous sociologist, wrote a book called, I can't remember, but it's like 1,000 pages. That's why I've read the synopsis. He coined expressive individual. It's not just enough for me to individual. You have to express it. And if anyone keeps you from expressing it, guess what? They're haters, or there's something you can stick the word phobic on the end of, right? That's it, right? Last, and I'm almost out of breath. Intellectual idols like communism, Marxism, socialism, capitalism. I love capitalism. It can be an idol, though. All right, so just like socialism is an idol, communism is an idol, capitalism can be. Let's stop there because the bell rang. Let's stand.